Hello, thanks for clicking on this video from Checkmate Humanity. Please do all those things that tell YouTube you want to see more of my videos and consider becoming a member of my channel. A lauded member of the true crime community, a founder of Adventures with Purpose, Jared Leisek, has now been indicted on 2 counts of child RAPE. Adventures with Purpose, as you may know, became famous for finding missing persons. Usually they are deceased because their expertise is in finding these missing persons in submerged cars that have been submerged underwater, or things that have been submerged underwater. And most recently, they were the ones who found Kylie Rodney after, a few weeks of searching. So these counts have come out in Utah. The counts are charged by his cousin. The cousin had gone to him directly. There is a family history of this. She had gone to him and asked him to turn himself in, and he refused. And there are a number of emails going back and forth between her and him through his company email, which I'll read in a moment, that are truly heartbreaking and honestly triggering and indicative of what it's like to be in this family dynamic. I've been very vocal about my own history. This is a generational issue. It's an epidemic. In all honesty, I can't remember speaking to one woman who has not experienced some sort of SA in her past. And in many, many cases, in more cases than not, it was by a trusted family member or person in authority, a priest, a teacher, a camp counselor, something like that. But in family situations, it's particularly dicey since it goes so far back and it happens so much, it gets swept under the rug, and the person who has been is the one who's supposed to bear all the brunt and be the forgiver. In many religions, we're taught to forgive. However, we also are a system of laws, and there are laws against these crimes, these very crimes. So just because we can forgive the crime doesn't mean that the crime should not be punished. And if these crimes are not punished, there will never be any change in the behavior. When people don't feel consequences of their actions, when they don't understand that their actions are something that were not okay, so not okay that they are going to be charged with a crime, things never change. And that is why we are where we are in this culture right now. However, I do believe that we are starting to wake up to the fact that this is not okay. And that is why more and more victims, like the victims in this case, are feeling more comfortable about coming forward. So that's what's happened here. So I'm going to go through the probable cause paragraph in the indictment. I'm going to read through the emails that went back and forth between the victim and Jared. And throughout, I'm going to give my perspective and a little bit of maybe even advice from a marketing and PR perspective. I do come at this from a very, very interesting perspective, because not only do I have this similar past, but I also spent 25 years representing high-profile figures in situations and understanding how to respond to crisis situations. And I do believe that this is very much a crisis situation for Adventures with Purpose, and that they should not sweep it under the rug, that they need to act with haste. So let's get into it, and then we'll come back on the other side. So here is the probable cause information in the indictment. Statement of probable cause. The defendant and the victim are cousins. In 1992, the victim was between 9 and 10 years old. The defendant is 7 years older than the victim. Just before November 1st, 1992, the victim lived in Ephraim, which is located in San Pete County. About this time, the defendant and the victim were in the victim's bedroom when the defendant pinned the victim to the ground, pulled her underwear down, and put his penis in her vagina. During another incident that same year, the defendant and victim were at their grandparents' house in Manti when the defendant laid on top of the victim and put his penis in her vagina. So now I'm going to read through in chronological order the emails that were sent by the victim to the company email. This was sent to the Adventures with Purpose company email because the two had been out of touch for some time, and this was the only way she could reach him. February 4th. To support. Do you feel better as a person doing things like this? Does this make you feel like less of a child molesting monster parading around in human skin? There is no forgiveness for what you did to me in my home in Utah, Grandma and Grandpa's house in Las Vegas, and right above Grandma and Grandpa's head in their very own truck. The rest of the family is just about as much to blame as you because they didn't turn you in when they knew better and I was just a child and did not know better. And you're still welcomed at family get-togethers or like my grandfather's funeral, the while in the parking lot getting ready to get out of the car. And I seen your face and became so violently ill, I couldn't even attend. I had to drive down the street to the CVS and watch it all via Zoom. All these people may be calling you a hero and saying that you're doing such great things, but we both know the truth about you, and you're obviously not ashamed of your past. But I'm also not ashamed of my past, and I have a voice, and I use it as much as I possibly can. Your secrets are not hidden. So then he responds, and it's in this next one. It's very hard to read these responses, you guys, because it is so indicative of what happens in families like this, where the victim is made to believe that they just need to get over it, that, hey, that was then, this is now. We can't change it. Can't change it. Sorry. It's extremely dismissive. It's extremely defensive. And it's also, in my view, manipulative. But let's keep going. I am so very sorry for the things that we cannot change. It is unfortunate that the Leisek and Juhaz lineage experienced the shit that you, I, and many of the other cousins were brought into. So let me put a pin in that. That is the issue with this familial epidemic. The harm is still there. We are not going to be able to break these cycles if people keep just sweeping it under the rug and saying, well, it happened to me too, so since it happened to you and I did it to you, it's okay. Think back on Don Wells. Don Wells, in the Summer Wells case, says that he was abused. Then he went on to abuse his sisters, stepsisters, potentially more people. He's also being charged in Utah. And he also swept it under the rug and victim blamed. He said, hey, she was 5 years old, but she wanted it. She wanted it. So this excuse isn't going to cut it anymore, because when things like this happen, the damage is long lasting. So yes, if you were abused, you should get that help. You should also get some sort of restitution for what happened to you, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't face what you did to other people. Like yourself, I was once a victim by multiple people, both in and out of the family. Well, that's terrible. That's horrible. It doesn't change what you then turn around and did. Also, it should be noted that when he did this, she was 9, and since he's 7 years older, he was, 16? That's a really big age difference. As you can see, this affects me a bit. That's why I'm not doing this live, because I'm going to have to pause a lot and collect myself. I would like the parents out there to think about their children Think about their 9-year-old child and how it would feel to have a 16-year-old family member do this and then grow up and try to excuse it. It's not going to cut it anymore. The only way to break the cycle is to face it. To face that it's a familial issue and learn how to change it. Not to sweep it under the rug. Not to wash over it like, it happens to everybody, so get over it. It's not okay. It causes too much damage to the victims. It causes so much damage that victims go out and cause more victims, or victims that don't go out and cause more victims, their lives are ruined. It is unfortunate when families like ours experience molestation. Many of us cousins got together to acknowledge what had happened in our youth and made a pact to put an end to it and to protect our children from anything like that ever happening to them. Well, that's great. I have myself tried to apologize to you and to have an open conversation with you about it to answer any questions you may have. The first time that I apologized to you, I am sorry for the way that it was handled, for I was under the impression that your mother knew and that I felt it was appropriate that at that time to have the conversation with both of you. I did not mean to embarrass you or to catch you off guard. The second time that I tried was not to clear my own conscience, but to help you heal and help with any struggles you may have been having, as many of us had to learn how to overcome and move forward. You essentially told me to go fuck myself and told me how I had embarrassed you the first time around. I am sorry. My understanding is that other cousins also have tried to have the same conversations with you. We are now all adults, and it is healthy for us to acknowledge and address these unfortunate circumstances from our past in our childhood and adolescent years. Right, but not sweep them under the rug. While there's a lot of shit that has happened throughout my own life personally, from molestation, abandonment, growing up in foster care, and any other shit along the way, I would not change a thing, for it has made me who I am today. So what I'm getting from this is he's saying, hey, I'm just as much of a victim as you, but I've gotten past it, and so you need to too. Hey, my answer to that is everybody heals in their own way. Just because you think you've been able to heal and move past it doesn't mean that the people you victimized are afforded the same healing, especially as we have learned when these people come forward and you get accepted, the abuser gets accepted, the abuser gets forgiven, and the victim gets alienated. The victim gets blamed. The victim is told they need to get over it. How about the abuser needs to stop abusing, and the family needs to stop enabling and allowing abuse to happen by ignoring it? That's how you break cycles. You don't break cycles by pretending that it didn't happen. I cannot apologize for others for anything that has happened to you in your life, but I have done my best to acknowledge directly with you my own mistakes. I hold no secrets as to this with my own parents, with grandma and grandpa, with your mother, aunt, blah, blah, and blah, blah, my own wife and my children. I have even discussed publicly about my situation and the unfortunate shit that has happened within families. Do we pinpoint it to the Leisek and Juhaz lineage, or do we pinpoint to Mormonism? I do not have an answer. There is no way for me to understand the hatred and resentment that you must have for me over 3 decades later. I want to go back to this question here. Do we pinpoint it to the Leisek and Juhaz lineage, or do we pinpoint it to Mormonism? I do not have an answer. There are families within every religious system that have these issues. When the religion comes in and becomes a problem is when it is used to justify it. Other religions and other ideologies have the same type of viewpoints. Look at Scientology. In Scientology, people are taught that children have 1,000-year-old souls, that everybody has thousands of years old souls, and they therefore should be treated like adults. They should be worked like adults, and their bodies should be treated like adults. Any PEDO is going to look for ways to justify their desires, justify their a need that they know is wrong. So they're going to find ideologies and religions that will support it in one way or another. Beliefs in any faith can be warped into this idea that women or children are just the objects of ownership. So these are all the things that need to change. There is no excuse whatsoever. There's no justification for essentially killing a child. Because I can tell you, doing this to a child leads to lifelong consequences, lifelong disability, lifelong depression, anxiety, that sometimes the child doesn't even know where it comes from because they may not even remember what happened to them, but it's still there. Even if you don't remember what happened to you and you feel that depression and anxiety, the source of it could be this treatment that happened as a child. You are not entitled to change that young girl's life forever because you have needs that are overwhelming. And now that we know the consequences, now that we know the lifelong consequences of such trauma, there are simply no more excuses. And if you are a person who's being accused of these kinds of things, and you think that behaving like this guy Jared is going to cut it, I hope you're seeing now that that's not going to cut it. You need to just rip off the Band-Aid and say, I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was taught wrong. I shouldn't have done it. I'm so sorry for doing that to you. And not make any more excuses. And now let's figure out how we can make restitution across the board. Moving on to this email. There is no way for me to understand the hatred and resentment that you must have for me over 3 decades later. So he's saying, wow, you still haven't gotten over it? I don't understand that. Yeah, well, it's hard to get over something that changes your life forever. I heard about your driving to the cemetery for a few weeks later. Trust me, had I known that you had a desire to be there and that I was the only person keeping you away, I would have 100% given up my time to do what I could to avoid the ceremony so that you would feel comfortable and have your time with Grandma and the rest of the family. Isn't that nice? I don't think she was trying to say, hey, look, you shouldn't have been there, so I could have been there. She was trying to explain the repercussions of their experience. What happens to someone? It's not like that kind of situation happens and then it just goes away. Especially when you see that person again. It actually comes all rushing back. As if it is happening all over again. Our bodies and our brains are designed to tell us when there is danger nearby. It's an autonomic response. We don't have any control over it. So the minute a trauma survivor sees, hears, has any notion, through any of their 5 senses that danger is near, there's going to be an immediate fight, flight, or freeze response. And sometimes it's all of them at the same time. It's not that the person who is feeling these things isn't strong enough to push them down. It's There's no control. It's almost like saying, okay, I'm no longer going to breathe. No, you have to breathe or you will die. And that's what this is what our brain is doing to us when we come across the object of our trauma. It's not under our control. We don't get to choose when we have a trauma response to a trigger from that specific trauma. Moving on with the email. It is your decision and your choice if you ever want to accept my apology. It's one thing to accept an apology. Yeah, anyone can accept an apology. But an apology is not enough in a situation like this. The circumstances need to change. The cycle needs to be broken. I have made peace in my life with all things bad, including this situation. Well, good for you. So he's made peace and he doesn't feel bad at all anymore. I've apologized. I don't feel bad anymore. So you should feel that way too. And if you don't, it's on you. If you ever want to discuss, I'm always available to have that conversation with you, either in person or on the phone. If you truly want to apologize, then pay for your actions. Good job, victim. Walk into a police station with me and confess your actions. Get it on record and have yourself registered as the sex offender that you are. My only regret in life was not being as open about you and your to anyone and everyone who would listen like I am now. And turning you into the police like you should have been. I don't understand how you can try and get me to sympathize with you and your past issues. Not at all. It angers me twice as much to know that not only did you know firsthand the torture you were inflicting upon me because you experienced it yourself. That makes you an even bigger monster than I have had picture in my mind. Absolutely disgusting. You're an emotional vampire. I noticed all the therapy terms you used in your message. Typical narcissism at its best. How somebody could ever come to peace with damaging such a young, innocent human being is beyond me. Proof of a completely broken mind, assuming that there would be any kind of peace after those types of actions, or that peace should even be deserved. You are a PEDO, PHILE. Do not act like you were not old enough to know what you were doing to me during the ages that you were. You could have been tried as an adult at that age and should have been. And as to the comments about my life and things that have happened to me, I don't know who or why you're even discussing me with, but I can guarantee you that nobody really knows anything because just like your situation, I've kept my mouth shut until recently, and I don't talk to any of the family despite what other, as you say, cousins have come forward to you and said. So be a real man and turn yourself in and pay for your crimes, or continue to be the small, sad mental midget that couldn't keep his libido under control and blames it on his past. And here's his response. Unfortunately, your desire to have a 46-year-old male live the mistakes of a 12-year-old simply is not realistic. So now he's lying about the age he was at the time. Very Don Wellesian. And that's where we start to lose sympathy, even more sympathy for this person. Thank God we are not forever judged for our actions as youth. And I'm grateful that many of us cousins acknowledged and stopped these sins which happened to us, and those sins we once committed as a result of grooming. So now he's starting to put it into religious vernacular. Oh, we all sin, and we have come to God with our sins, and Jesus died for us on the cross, blah 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 blah. So and by the way, all of us cousins acknowledge this. We've already talked about this. Where were you? Didn't you get the memo? Well, I guess, my personal response would be my brain didn't get the memo. My brain is still, toiling over this and trying to heal over it. Something that didn't need to happen when I was 9 years old. Thank God we are not forever judged for our actions as youth, and I'm grateful that many of us cousins acknowledged and stopped these sins which happened to us, and those sins we once committed as a result of grooming. It is healthy for you to now be open and talk about the past. Oh, how noble for you to say that. You, as a full-grown woman in your early 40s, are to be commended for facing and standing up to those actions which happened to you in the past. Spread awareness and stop the cycle as we cousins within the family have for our own children and grandchildren. Hopefully. But sweeping it under the rug does not break the cycle. Protect your own children and grandchildren as we have to help the world become a better place. Sweeping it under the rug does not protect those children. We live in a society that acknowledges the mistakes made in the past, accepting those who have proven to change. Those that have proven to change after they actually face consequences for their actions. My life holds no secrets, and everyone in my office feels your pain and has seen this email string, for I don't filter my own emails. So he's clearly, speaking to a large audience, including his staff, and they're all seeing this unfold in real time in his office as these emails are going back and forth, and that's probably fairly humiliating to him, right? So he has to kind of create this narrative of, hey, we've talked about this. This is a family issue. We all experienced this. We've dealt with it. We've gotten over it. And, look at you. Here you are. Well, you should be commended for it. But in the next paragraph, they know me for the man that I am and not the mistakes of a 12-year-old, again, lying about his age, who learned to recognize the cycle and break the cycle as many of us cousins did. You were younger and not ready to accept my apology and recognize the steps we made for future generations to protect him. An apology can be accepted, but that does not mean that consequences should not be meted out for the apologizer. I hope you can one day find forgiveness and peace. Feel free to have any last words, for I will not respond to any further attacks to my character today based upon these actions as a youth. Should you desire a healthy adult conversation as to the past, I am open to helping you through the acceptance and growth that many of us faced and have dealt with. So what he's basically doing is saying, this is not a me problem. This is a you problem. You need to get over it. Now, just because someone stops physically or sexually abusing someone does not mean they have stopped being an abuser. And it does not mean that they have stopped having an abuse mentality. The abuse mentality dictates that the person who was abused, if they can't deal with it, they are weak. If they still feel pain over that abuse, they are the weak one. No, the weak one was the abuser. The weak one was the one who wasn't able to control their need to abuse. That's what needs to change. Stop putting the entire responsibility for an abuse situation on the victim to change everything. The entire responsibility is on the victim to make everything better. What needs to change is an abuser's need to abuse, and that being absolved and swept under the rug by families. If you have not done so already, I may suggest reaching out to blah and lean on her for guidance as one closer to your age who within the family has gone through this with us. I'm not sure your relationship with Aunt blah blah or your mother, but I'd suggest leaning on them as well, for they experience much of the same in their own youth. This is an actual crime. So it's not up to me, this guy Jared is saying, to see the consequences of an actual crime. It's up to you to go find peace so that you can bear the brunt of my crime and then absolve it somehow, get it out of you somehow. No, you're the one who did that thing. You did it. You have to face it. So her response is, let's do some math here. I was 9 or 10 when living in Utah, and you forced me to have sex with you on my bathroom floor upstairs. You are 6 or so years older than me. That makes you older than 12. In Las Vegas at Grandma and Grandpa's house, you were living there and you had your own car, a Volkswagen Beetle, and was driving it when it ran. So please stop making it sound as if you were a young child doing this during the time you were molesting me. Maybe you started that young with the others, but as good point. But as you are not willing to face your wrongdoing in a proper fashion, then that is on you and you alone. Anyone who supports you and your sick delusional fantasy of forgiving yourself for the pain and suffering you cause and willingly and knowingly cause not only a child but your own family member, but I do appreciate your admitting it all in writing.
Absolutely. Jared himself alluded or even said it in the email that there was families and together and there was it was a very like they had a way to deal with it. Why haven't you dealt with it? Type of kind of shift blaming the victim, if that makes sense.
It 100 makes sense because that is the family dynamic. This does go generations back. I won't go into much detail about that because, again, that's all their stories. But, this is generational for sure. So it's been almost to the point where, as angry as I am towards my mother for hugging him and telling her she forgave him, I almost kind of later looking back on it and after going to therapy and discussing it, I can understand why going through that kind of family trauma, that was her immediate knee-jerk reaction, because that's what they're taught to do. That's what we were all taught to do.
How does it feel to have people say or try to discredit your story?
I've kind of lived with that my whole life. That was nothing new.
Oh my gosh. Anything else that you want to share about where your mind was at the time when you sent it?
I would love to say that any of this was actually bravery, but it was just full on. I was upset. Everything came back to the surface. Everything that I had, like Jesse said, thought I'd moved on from, thought I had pushed down and dealt with and had just, it just became okay with, like I was supposed to, like everybody else in the family. And then, all of that happened, and it was just, I was upset. And everything over those generations of being upset about that, from the moment that I stood there silently screaming in my head, this is a lie, as he's admitting to my mom what he said he did to me, all the way up until this point, just came out in writing at that moment.
The clips I just showed you were from Down the Rabbit Hole News, and I want to commend them because what they did was they had both of the victims of Jared's that have come out, and this is Jared's cousin and sister. The sister was actually alienated from the family for calling out his abuse. And that is the experience of many victims in these situations, that they become the person who is the black sheep. They become the one who, because they're calling out something that's objectively wrong, they are the ones that get alienated because the previous generations don't want to face consequences. They don't want to admit that what they did was wrong. But Down the Rabbit Hole News interviewed these two victims. They respected the confidentiality and the anonymity of one of the victims and gave her sound advice, and that is to watch out who you're dealing with in YouTube, because on YouTube, like I said, I've come out and talked about my situation. Unfortunately, there are so many people who don't understand and are so ignorant of the situation that, and there are also people who have vested interest in ensuring that culture remains. People who want to do this to children get to keep doing this to children in families or wherever. And so, in all honesty, I've never seen more cruelty, more victim blaming, more exploitation of of my situation or of other people's situations in general than I have on YouTube and on social media. And it's unfortunate, but it is the reality. And another perspective I come from is as somebody who worked inside technology and then became an activist about technology through a nonprofit called the Center for Humane Technology. And the unfortunate thing is that these platforms have not built compassion into their systems. They have built capitalism into their businesses, and capitalism dictates that the most outrageous, the most attention-driving content is going to get the most views and going to get the most validation. And the most views and most validation comes from content that keeps people glued longer. And you know, when there's conflicting content that causes conflict, it keeps people there longer. And it gives this notion that because more people have viewed it, it's more agreed to, that people agree with it, that it's the better content, when it's not the case. So there are really warped incentives for people who don't give a crap about victims, who don't give a crap about the effect that these situations have had on victims, to exploit the situation on either side. And also there's an incentive for, so for a large organization on YouTube that has seen a lot of success to try to discredit the accuser. And I'm not saying that that's what's happening right now. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen in the future, but that is what tends to happen, is that the abuser tries to discredit the accuser and make them out to be, crazy. But I want to say that nothing that anyone could say about the accuser is going to change that the allegations are there, and that this guy has admitted to this. He has admitted to this, okay? So it's not like he's saying he didn't do it. It's that he's saying he shouldn't suffer any legal or criminal consequences for it. So going back to Down the Rabbit Hole News, I feel that they did a good service to the victims by saying, hey, look, I'm not going to reveal your face, your name, and I want to warn you about engaging with other YouTubers and making sure that you aren't exploited. And I don't know if the victims will see this. Don't know. But if they do, it may be a good idea for them to reach out to people from the Don Wells family who are also bringing charges to Don Wells in Utah. I know that the interview room has direct contact with that family and maybe can put them in touch. I just think that there's been a lot of YouTube activity around the Don Wells case and around the allegations brought by his stepsisters, and their experience might be extremely beneficial to these victims as well, as they try to maneuver this treacherous space where, unfortunately, the platforms will not protect them from very cruel, heartless treatment of their story. I really wish the victims the best of luck in getting justice, and I commend them for speaking out. And I think the last thing I want to say is that for anybody who's been through this, it's really, really hard to see so much more of this coming out. It's not surprising, but it's hard. And the feeling that one gets when one sees the same thing happening to someone else on such a large scale, kind of such a high profile public nature, when you see those things coming out, there's this constant feeling of, oh shit, and a tightening of the chest. And I constantly feel like I'm about to cry. There's this pressure behind my eyes, and my eyes feel like they're always watering up, and I have to stop a lot and put my head down and wipe tears. I'm not asking for sympathy here whatsoever. I'm trying to describe how it feels to be someone who has been involved in a similar situation, and then to see it happening to other people on such a regular basis, and see the treatment that they've been given by their family members. It's such a reminder. And when other people and family members say that was so long ago, get over it, tell that to their autonomic nervous system. Any amount of therapy or medication or whatever is not going to change that those feelings come up. It's how you manage those feelings. And it's about not taking those feelings out on other people. This is a real difficult situation, but it's something that we all need to be aware of. It touches so many lives. This is one of the reasons that my channel exists, is because of this intergenerational trauma and breaking the cycle. And I feel that social media has a major role to play in keeping the cycles going because of its negligence in keeping us safe from such cruelty. When we come out, it silences victims. And that's not what free speech is about, right? Free speech isn't about silencing people. Free speech is about helping everyone have a voice. But that doesn't work when a person with not as much power's voice is silenced and drowned out by someone with a bigger voice, even if they're wrong. But social media gives them that bigger voice. Social media gives them that power. And if they're willing to exploit the tools to create more dissonance or lie even about the victim, they're drowned out even more. And that's how the bad guy wins. So thank goodness we are a system of laws, but then we're dependent on the legal system to be hip and modernized to understanding the very delicate and complicated dynamics of interfamilial abuse. My heart goes out to the victims. My heart goes out to anyone affected by this. Stay tuned. And in the meantime, remember, you don't know who's going through what in their private lives. Be kind. Peace out.